Good evening. Welcome to Southern California Edison's Wildfire Safety Community Livestream meeting for Orange County. My name is Kelly Lee, and I am a Government Relations Manager for Southern California Edison. We greatly appreciate you spending your time with us this evening and want to thank you for submitting your questions beforehand. I would also like to thank the County of Orange, as well as our state and federal elected officials and their staff for joining us tonight. We appreciate that you have always had open lines of communication, and we look forward to our ongoing partnership. I want to give a special shout out to Pat Buttress in Supervisor Wagner's office. Hi, Pat. We recognize how important it is for you and your families to have electricity, especially during a pandemic, when many of you are working and learning from home. Our company is focused on safely providing reliable service to our customers and communities. At Edison, our #1 priority remains public safety. We want to provide you with the latest information on how we're preparing for the wildfire season and what you can do to be prepared. During the most recent wildfire season, we implemented Public Safety Power Shutoff, or PSPS, to reduce the threat of wildfires. We know many of you experience multiple PSPS events, and we know that these outages are difficult. We heard your concerns, and we want to discuss tonight how we are going to do better. We are committed to reducing the need of PSPS outages, and we'll be sharing more information during our presentation. Please know, if you get disconnected or if you need to drop off early, this meeting is being recorded and it will be posted on our website at sce.com/wildfire. Next slide, please. As always, your feedback is extremely important to us, and we encourage you to submit questions. Because we have a large number of attendees, we will be taking questions through the Q&A window. You should be able to see the window on the right-hand side. If there is a similar question already being asked that you would like answered, you can click on the heart icon next to the question to like it. We will address the questions that receive the most likes first, and we'll go down from there. We ask that you please ask questions that are relevant to the topic and material being presented. We will do our very best to answer as many questions as possible in the allotted time. Next slide, please. I am joined tonight by the following presenters. We have Christy Fanous, Managing Director, Compliance, Vegetation, and Operational Services, who will share our wildfire mitigation and PSPS action plans. Rob Tucker, Principal Manager with Transmission and Distribution, who will share our efforts to reduce the need for PSPS. And David Kint, Senior Manager with Customer Service, who will share information on our customer care and community engagement efforts. Next slide, please. We plan to cover these topics as part of our presentation. We hope that the information presented will address many of your questions. Following our presentation, we will then open it up for Q&A to answer questions submitted in the Q&A window. Next slide. An emergency can happen at any time, so it's important to always be prepared. Here are some easy steps to remember from our partners at the California Fire Safe Council and Listos, California. Number 1, get alerts to know what to do. Orange County has Alert OC that you can sign up for at alertoc.com, and your city may also have its own alerting system. 2, you can help your family be prepared for any emergency situation with a safety preparedness plan and a little advanced planning. 3, pick a go bag for when you have to leave home in a hurry. It should include copies of important papers, photos of your family and pets, small bills, lists of medications and emergency contacts, and supplies like a flashlight, portable radio, and first aid kit. 4, build a stay box for you when you can't leave home. Prepare for at least 3 days without water or electricity for you, your family, and your pets. Lastly, you can help your friends, family, or others you care about to get ready and plan ahead. These are tips to help be prepared for any emergency. For more specific tips on preparing for a wildfire, earthquake, or other emergency, there are resources on our website, which we'll share at the end of the presentation. I'd now like to hand it over to Christy.
Thanks, Kelly. My name is Christy Fanous. I'm a Managing Director in our Transmission and Distribution Organization at Southern California Edison. It's great to be with you tonight as we talk about wildfire safety and the plans that SCE has in the works to help improve our PSPS process, or Public Safety Power Shutoff. 2020 was an unprecedented year in many ways, not just in COVID. Across the state, 2020 was the worst year on record as we think about wildfires, with nearly 10,000 fires that burned over 4.2 million acres and consumed about 4% of all land in California. Here in Southern California, from summer to the end of the year, we had experienced record dry fuel levels from heat waves and lack of precipitation. There were 70% more red flag days in 2020 versus 2019. Rainfall totals in Central and Southern California were 50 to 75% below average. As you can see here on this chart, 5 of the 6 largest wildfires in California all happened in 2020, which is a sobering statistic and highlights the need for all of us to stay focused on our efforts to reduce the risks and mitigate the impacts of wildfires. Next slide, please. Towards the end of last year, we had more Santa Ana wind events combined with high fire potential. So we had to implement public safety power shutoffs, or PSPS, and temporarily shut off power to prevent our electric system from becoming the source of an ignition. PSPS events impacted about 138,000 of our customers, which we know also added to the challenges of the COVID-19 pandemic. We have a full appreciation of all the difficulties that came with not having power for people who were working from home, children going to school online, or for customers who have access and functional needs. And with the weather patterns experienced in 2020, the PSPS events we saw between November and December and into mid-January of 2021 was a much different experience than what we saw in 2019. We need to take into account the events of 2020, and we are working to make significant progress in reducing the risk of wildfires, as well as reducing the impact of PSPS as part of our wildfire mitigation and PSPS action plans. For this year, unfortunately, we are already in fire season, as we have already seen fire activity increasing over the last several weeks. All of this underscores the importance of having a more resilient grid that will significantly reduce the risk of utility equipment sparking catastrophic wildfires, and the need for PSPS as a tool of last resort. And so SCE remains dedicated to keeping our communities safe by making our infrastructure more resilient against the increasing threat of extreme conditions driven by changes in our climate. Next slide, please. We've worked really hard to develop a comprehensive wildfire mitigation plan. It includes many of the features identified here on this slide that I'll touch on. As we think about grid hardening, we're making improvements to make the grid more resilient in high fire risk areas. We're improving reliability and reducing wildfire risk. We've installed over 960 circuit miles of covered conductor. This is important because we want to try to reduce the risk of contact from a foreign object that could cause a spark. And so Rob will be touching more on what we're doing with the covered conductor or insulated wires. We've installed over 6,000 fire-resistant poles, over 3,000 fast-acting fuses, and 49 additional devices to better segment our system that will further support reducing the need for a PSPS event. As we think about situational awareness, we're also doing quite a bit to bolster our situational awareness capabilities. We have over 1,000 weather stations and are continuing to install more, along with 166 fire spotting high-definition cameras to monitor location-specific real-time conditions that help inform our operational decision-making. We have a team of meteorologists and a fire scientist on staff that use these capabilities along with other tools, such as our fuel sampling program, supercomputers, and fire spread modeling technology to better forecast and predict wildfires. Our high-risk inspections, we are annually inspecting overhead equipment in high fire areas to identify potential safety hazards. Last year, we inspected nearly 200,000 distribution assets and over 35,000 transmission assets. Our field crews are conducting ground inspections, and we also use drones and helicopters to conduct aerial inspections. This way, we're able to get a 360-degree view of our equipment for any needed and can identify any needed maintenance, repair, or replacements. Vegetation management is also a really important component of our wildfire mitigation plan. Annually, we inspect 1.4 million trees across our service territory to determine if they could pose a hazard by making contact with our power lines. Last year, we assessed nearly 100,000 hazard trees. These are trees right outside of our right-of-way that may no longer be healthy and could fall and strike our lines. We removed 12,000 that could fall into our lines and lead to ignitions. This year, we plan to assess approximately up to 200,000 hazard trees in high-risk areas and remove them if we deem them unsafe. We also will be removing about 11,000 palm trees over the next 2 years that may come in contact with our power lines and pose risks to public safety. Customers who have palm trees affected by this program will be contacted by SCE to discuss. Lastly, as I mentioned earlier, we use public safety power shutoffs, or PSPS, as a tool of last resort to protect our communities from the threat of wildfire. I'll discuss more on the next slide about how we make the decision to implement a PSPS. Next slide, please. For each PSPS event, we activate our PSPS incident management team led by an incident commander, which I have served as the incident commander on numerous PSPS events. We do this and we manage the event and make decisions to shut off power based on real-time conditions. We consider PSPS when weather and fire experts forecast dangerous conditions, including strong winds, very dry vegetation, and low humidity. Those three attributes combined create a risk that flying debris or other damage to our wires and equipment could cause a fire with the potential to spread rapidly. Our meteorologists and fire scientists review weather conditions using both internal and external models and the National Weather Service forecasts, alerts, and warnings. Well, we also speak to county offices of emergency management to discuss any public safety issues. As Kelly mentioned, we don't take the decision to shut off power lightly and ask the following questions before we make that decision. Is this shutoff needed to protect public safety? And can we safely reduce the number of customers who will be impacted? This is just a quick summary of some of our decision points, but we've created a new webpage that has much more detailed information, and you can see the link there in the top right-hand corner of the slide. Next slide, please. As mentioned earlier, we seriously take the concerns that we heard about our PSPS execution, and we know we have to do better. We filed a PSPS action plan with the California Public Utilities Commission earlier this year that addresses these 5 main areas that you see on the screen. I'll summarize these 5 areas and then hand it over to other presenters who are going to cover these in much more detail. The first area addresses reducing the need for PSPS, which means hardening the grid with the goal of reducing the scope, the frequency, and the duration of PSPS events, especially to help those areas where our customers may have been impacted numerous times. Rob will be providing more information on this. While this doesn't mean that there won't be situations in which PSPS won't still be needed, the frequency and duration should significantly decrease, as you'll hear more about in the next few slides. The second area of focus is to improve our execution of PSPS events. One of the ways we expect to do that is by providing better transparency into the decision-making process, which I touched on the previous slide. We also understand the issues and frustrations surrounding how notifications of PSPS events are received, and are working to make significant improvements to our notifications that you receive before, during, and after PSPS events. The third area of focus is reducing the impacts of PSPS for when they do occur. We will be increasing our efforts to reduce the impact, especially on our most vulnerable customers. We will be working to increase the enrollment in our medical baseline program and expand participation in other areas such as critical care battery backup program and other incentives to support providing more backup solutions. We'll also be working with local and tribal governments to further look for ways to increase community resiliency by expanding our services that will enhance the safety of the community overall. The fourth area of focus is to keep our partners and customers clearly and consistently informed. You can expect better ways to receive educational materials, including our website for information about PSPS. And for our public safety partners, we will leverage technology to improve information sharing and coordination as we work together to plan and respond in a more comprehensive way. And lastly, we're working to enhance and improve our post-event reporting to make them more transparent and clear for our stakeholders. We've learned a lot about our experiences so far, and these reports go a long way in continually improving our performance after every event. In a nutshell, the outcomes we are expecting are to reduce the scope and frequency of PSPS, improve our coordination and engagement with our partners and critical infrastructure customers, expand our outreach and enrollments with vulnerable customers, and improve our post-event reports. And now I'd like to hand it over to Rob Tucker to cover our grid hardening efforts and what we're doing to reduce the need for PSPS.
Thank you, Christy. As Christy said, I'm going to cover the first focus area mentioned, which is to reduce the need for PSPS. To that end, we've developed a concentrated effort focusing primarily on the frequently impacted circuits. Those are circuits that have experienced 4 or more PSPS de-energizations since 2019. This effort is targeted on the hardest hit communities, but I will reinforce that the general grid hardening effort goes well beyond these hard hit circuits. Therefore, I don't want to imply that we're ignoring other customers or other circuits in Orange County or say that other circuits are being left behind. However, we feel it's appropriate to focus a concentrated effort on those areas that experienced the most PSPS events over the past couple of years. This targeted effort is what we call expedited grid hardening, and it's what I'm discussing this evening. Our goal is to achieve reductions in the number of customers impacted by PSPS events, the frequency of PSPS events, and the duration of PSPS events, and to complete this work in the time frame between now and October 1st, which is historically when we see our highest PSPS impacts. What we'll share this evening is where we're at this point in expedited grid hardening. We understand 2020 was a particularly difficult year. We learned from past PSPS events so that we can improve going forward. And the actual events from 2020 and years prior give us a lot of insight onto the specific areas we need to target. We do this targeting using a number of tools that we believe will improve the customer experience. Next slide, please. Some of the tools that we are using are shown on this slide. The first is insulated wires. It's an important tool to reduce PSPS events. The alternative, bare wire, is open to the elements, and if things come into contact with these wires, it can create a short circuit. The short circuit can result in a power outage and can possibly lead to an ignition, igniting the debris that came into contact with the lines. This debris can include palm fronds, tree branches, mylar balloons, other debris that can blow into our lines. Insulating or covering our wire prevents this unintentional contact from becoming an ignition by harmlessly allowing the debris to flow into and out of our lines without resulting in the short circuit. By insulating our wires, we're able to raise our wind speed thresholds for PSPS de-energization events, and in some cases raise them to a level where PSPS events are unlikely. I'll also note that insulating our wire has reliability benefits beyond PSPS. Wind-related events can occur throughout the year, and this can cause the power to be shut off even outside of traditional fire season. Therefore, insulated wires will provide not only PSPS benefits, but will provide reliability benefits in reducing the frequency of non-PSPS outages as well. The second method listed here is segmentation. This was a key focus area for us last year, and we are building on that work for 2021. This involves installing remote-controlled automated switches that allow us to de-energize specific smaller areas of concern. The benefit to segmentation is that we can reduce the number of customers impacted by PSPS events, or in some cases reduce the duration of those events as well. The third method is installing new weather stations. It's another way that we can reduce PSPS by improving our situational awareness with on-the-ground continuous weather data such as winds, temperature, and humidity. This data gives us more precision about weather at specific locations, and particularly when coupled with automated switches, gives us the ability to turn the power off in smaller areas, or in some cases even avoid turning off the power altogether. The next tool is switching protocols. Many of our circuits have connections to adjacent circuits or nearby circuits. If an adjacent circuit is not impacted, or if it has already been hardened, then there may be opportunities to switch some customers from one circuit to the adjacent circuit. This only works if the nearby circuit is itself not impacted by PSPS, but as we continue to harden more and more circuits, we will get more of a community benefit effect. This allows greater numbers of customers to be switched to adjacent circuits for PSPS reduction benefits. The fifth item is what we call operational protocols for the use of PSPS. This is where, say, based on recent changes to the environment, certain circuits, certain portions of circuits, or certain portions of segments can be removed from PSPS. An example is an area with lack of vegetation, possibly due to a recent fire or a burn scar area. We're frequently asked why we don't just underground our wires. We do consider undergrounding as an option, and we are identifying locations where undergrounding can provide further meaningful wildfire risk reduction. But it can take much longer to construct underground conversions, and it is more costly and difficult to maintain and repair, particularly in mountainous and rocky terrain. The other options, such as I talked about, insulated wires, are more cost-effective and particularly can be deployed much quicker, which can make the most difference in reducing wildfire risk with a short turnaround time. Next slide, please. We get these two questions asked frequently. The first question is, why do my neighbors across the street have power and I don't? And a related second question that we often get is, why is my power turned off if I live in an underground area? The answer is that it depends on the circuit that feeds your home as compared to the circuit that feeds your neighbor's home. The picture here is intended to depict homes on the left fed by underground wires. Before it goes underground, the circuit feeding these homes has an overhead section that traverses over a high fire area as shown in the elevated terrain you can see in the far left of the picture. These homes, even though they are served underground, can be subject to PSPS. Now, the homes across the street in this example are fed from a different circuit. In this example, it is all overhead circuitry, but this circuit does not traverse through the high fire area, and therefore they themselves may not be subject to PSPS. This picture, of course, assumes that the neighborhood itself is not in a designated high fire area otherwise. And if it was, the overhead circuitry on the right could also be a PSPS concern as well. Next slide, please. Overall, there were 72 circuits in the Edison system in our service territory identified as frequently impacted circuits. Here's a map that shows the 2 frequently impacted circuits in Orange County. I'm going to show more details about these 2 circuits in a moment. The circuit in the southern portion of the map at the bottom, the green circuit, is called the Atento, and the circuit in the northern portion of the map in a brownish reddish color is called the Veracruz. Next slide, please. Starting with the Atento first. The Atento is in the southern part of Orange County, and as a circuit, it serves just over 2,700 customers. This slide shows a map at the left and text at the right. I'm going to start with a map first. Starting with the map, the substation that feeds this circuit is the blue dot at the bottom of the map, the southern portion of the map. This is in the city of Lake Forest. The circuit generally runs south to north from the substation, feeding customers along the way. This goes into unincorporated areas and the canyon areas north of the city of Lake Forest. On the map, overhead portions of the circuit are in orange color, and underground portions of the circuit are in green color. So this is an example of a circuit where you can see even underground customers may be fed from a circuit that goes overhead in the circuit configuration. Our expedited grid hardening plan is listed at the right, and it is highlighted in callouts on the map at the left. Specifically, the existing circuit has some portions, not all, but some, that have already had bare wire replaced with new insulated wire. As part of our plan, we are removing an additional 22 miles of existing bare wire and replacing it with new insulated wire at various portions in the overhead portions of the circuit. The portion in the middle of the circuit, the black dotted oval, is where we are applying operational protocols to raise PSPS thresholds in this area. This is actually a burn scar area, and for the coming PSPS season, this area represents a low risk of ignition due to that burn scar area. With these mitigations in place, assuming identical weather and operating conditions as we saw in 2020, we would have experienced close to a 50% reduction in the use of PSPS on the Atento circuit. Let's go to the next slide, please. Now, the second frequently impacted circuit in Orange County is called the Veracruz. This is in the northern portion of Orange County, and it serves just over 1,700 customers. Again, the substation that feeds the circuit is represented by a blue dot. In this case, it's on the left side of the map, or the west side of the map. It's on the very edge of the city of Brea, I believe. The circuit here generally runs west to east from the substation, again, feeding customers along the way into the areas east of the substation, following for much of the way Carbon Canyon Road in this case. The overhead portions of the circuit, again, are in orange color, and underground portions of the circuit are in green color. So again, you see the overhead and underground combinations in this example. Again, our expedited grid hardening plan is listed at the right and highlighted on the map at the left. In this case, although the map doesn't show it, likewise with the Atento, the Veracruz does have some portions that have already had previous bare wire replaced with new insulated wire. As part of our expedited grid hardening plan, we are replacing an additional 4.5 miles of existing bare wire and replacing it with new insulated wire. We're also implementing switching protocols on the Veracruz. Specifically in this case, there is a portion of the circuit that is circled and called out with the arrow at the left. We have updated the location of the boundary between the first two PSPS operational segments in the area called out by the circle. That area marks the boundary between the first and second segment for PSPS operational practices. This change allows for better switching and segmentation during PSPS events for the benefit of the customers on the circuit. With these mitigations in place, again, assuming identical weather and operating conditions as 2020, we would have experienced close to a 40% reduction in the use of PSPS on the Veracruz circuit. Let's go to the next slide, please. Now, this graph depicts the circuit's actual PSPS performance during the year 2020, and then what likely would have occurred in 2020 if we had our planned mitigations in place. The dark gray bars are what actually occurred in 2020, and the higher the gray bar, the bigger the PSPS impact. You will note, for example, that the Atento impact in 2020 was significantly larger than the Veracruz impact. The orange bars are what we believe would happen in 2020 with identical weather conditions, but if we had the mitigations in place. Overall, for both frequently impacted circuits in Orange County, these circuits would see an aggregate 47% reduction in PSPS impacts if we can complete the grid hardening work. The results assume, again, the same weather conditions as last year. No one can predict the future weather this fall, and we don't know if 2020 will repeat itself. I just want to make that caveat, but subject to that caveat, The frequently impacted circuits in Orange County should see a significant PSPS improvement because of our expedited grid hardening plans. I'm going to hand this over now to David.
Good evening, and once again, I want to thank everyone for joining this evening. We know you have choices, and the fact that you chose to join our call this evening speaks to your interests, so we do appreciate that. I'm going to cover, I think I have 5 slides in total, so about the next 10 minutes, and I'm going to cover a lot of our customer outreach and customer communication. I'm going to start with our notifications, and this is an area where, quite frankly, we have fallen short of your expectations as well as our own. We erred on the side of over communicating when it comes to messaging and alerting regarding outages. And we learned quickly last year that caused a lot of confusion. We heard from you directly, which we appreciate. And we are taking action to actually redeploy our notification protocols with a June 21st deployment date. So it's coming up here pretty quick with some significant changes. Let me talk a little bit about some of the notification processes we have in place. We have what we call the account holder notification, and that is the most direct alerting that we can provide you as an account holder. You would have to go into your SEMI account and sign up for account level alerts, address level alerts. Those are the most effective and the ones we recommend today. And then we'll provide those alerts to you via your choice of channel, either email, text, or voice. We also deployed what we refer to as zip code alerts, and quite frankly, the zip code alerts caused a lot of confusion this past year. They were really intended for anyone actually within SCE or outside of SCE's service territory to be able to be alerted when there is a circuit that is going to be de-energized. So let me give you an example. My mother lives in Moreno Valley, and I signed up for zip code alerts so I can be made aware if her circuit were being impacted. And that's really the intent of those zip code level alerts. We are rethinking those. We are actually encouraging customers to really focus on the account level and not so much the zip code, unless you have certain situations like the one I just described. We've also partnered with Nextdoor with the app, and you can receive outage alerts directly from the Nextdoor app. We also have done a lot of work regarding some visual tools for you. The little map you see on the right is a representative of a section of our service territory that would potentially be displayed if we were in a PSPS event or pre-event. So let's say we had some circuits in Orange County that were on what we call the period of concern due to weather conditions. We anticipate potential need to de-energize in support of PSPS in your area. You would be able to go to this map and actually see a visual of the impacted circuits. You could enter your address into this upper box on the right, and it would let you know if you were potentially going to be impacted. There's different levels of information on this map. The little orange legend box you see would light up with the image of the circuit if it were de-energized. The gray box would show the circuits that are in consideration. You can actually see one towards the kind of the center upper section of the map. And then we have a couple of resources that I'm going to dive into a little deeper with you, and those are our community resource centers and community crew vehicles that we deploy in support of our customers in the field. So the little yellowish circle, those are our community crew vehicles. We have 8 mobile vans or trucks that we deploy to help our customers during an event. And the triangle are actually community resource centers, which are brick and mortar storefronts, if you will. They're buildings. They can come in a variety of different shapes and sizes that I'll go into more detail. All of this is displayed on the map. And I'm spending a little extra time on this because I want you to know that this resource is there for you. And I encourage you all to become familiar with it if you have the means to view this online. Let's go to the next slide. All right, so this is getting into the meat of the programs, and I didn't mention it up front, but my day job is developing customer care programs and services. So I spend a lot of time in this space. I'm very familiar and passionate about many of the programs and services that we've been able to provide. The first one on the upper left is a program for a fully subsidized battery, and it's designed to help our most vulnerable customers, our critical care medical baseline customers. These are targeting customers in high fire risk areas, and it's a portable battery that we bring to your home and install. Excuse me, we provide to you, again, fully subsidized, and it's intended to power your critical medical equipment. So there's some qualifications that you would have to go through, right? You have to be a critical care identified customer. I think a medical baseline now, which is new, and in a high fire risk area. And I encourage you to look into that program on our website. And I think in the appendix of this deck, you'll have links to all of these resources. The next 2 rebates I want to talk about are just encouraging customers to invest in resiliency. So we have a $50 rebate for a portable battery. This is a little different than that fully subsidized battery. These smaller, perhaps portable batteries are really designed to provide backup power in the home, potentially to recharge your cell phone, your laptop. It could provide power to your modem and router to keep your internet up at home. Larger batteries can also provide power to lighting and other appliances in your home. We also offer for customers that have a water pumping dependency a $300 to $500 rebate for a fossil fuel generator. And these rebates are, again, intended to help customers to ensure they have access to water. We're looking at enhancing both of these programs, so more information to come on those in the next month or 2. We also have a very important program. It's a statewide program called Self-Generation Incentive Program, or SGIP. These are whole home batteries that are, we have discounts or rebates associated with them. These are installed by contractors, and they can provide power to your entire home for up to a day, depending on your load and your consumption in your home. So this is a big program, multi-million-dollar statewide program, and there's some really great incentives for different levels of eligibility. So if you're in a high fire risk or a disadvantaged community, and you might be a income qualified customer, meaning you qualify for a Care FARA program, there's some discounts that'll almost pay for the entire cost of the whole home battery. My key point that I want you to take away from this left side of the slide here is all of this information is on our website. They're great programs that can help you to mitigate the impact of a de-energization. It doesn't just have to be PSPS, it can be any emergency where you might lose power. And so I encourage you all to take a look at those programs. The middle section here, and I'm going to try to go a little quicker, is these are resources that we deploy during an event. So our community crew vehicles, I mentioned, we have 8. We deploy those and we've used them heavily, quite frankly, with the COVID-19 safety protocols that we put into place. So we don't want, obviously during COVID, we didn't want to have large numbers of customers going into rooms to receive our services. So we have used outdoor events quite a bit in the last year. So these community crew vehicles have been used extensively for those. The community resource centers, we currently have 60 under contract today. We have 2 in Orange County. And these are, again, brick and mortar locations. We actually have a Sears in, I think it's in the city of Orange off of Tustin that we have under contract. And we just signed the Courtyard Marriott, I believe, in Foothill Ranch. These are locations where during an event where we would de-energize in the area, we would have those posted on that map and we would communicate this to you. So you would know if you needed to visit that site to perhaps charge your phone, get some information about the outage, and receive some other resources that we hand out. So we have trained staff that are at these sites. They have fact sheets, program information. We hand out water, snacks, and we've developed these resiliency kits that include a fully charged USB power bank. What else do we have in there? Flashlights. We have some personal protection equipment for COVID, specifically masks, gloves, hand sanitizers. Now these kits are very popular with our customers, and you know, we hand them out to customers during these events. Sometimes we have long lines of customers who show up, and it's a good thing because we're there to serve our customers, and we're glad the word's getting out. Lastly, we have partnered with hotels to provide discounts to customers who are impacted by PSPS de-energizations. Right now, we're working on one in Orange County. I'll hopefully have some good news to share on that one soon. It's actually the same Courtyard Marriott in Foothill Ranch. Hopefully we can get that one available for you. And moving on to the right column on the resiliency, we have a couple of different pilots that we're running today. We have what we refer to as a resiliency zone, and these are targeted rural areas where we would want to provide backup power for essential services. So think about customers that might be in a remote section of Orange County up in the hills, in the canyons, and to get to the next gas station or a small grocery store or pharmacy, they might have to travel quite a few miles to get there. But if there's a small community where we can provide backup power, then we're trying to identify those and get those retrofitted with a transfer switch. And so if and when we have to de-energize, we will provide a backup generator to power that facility during the outage. So that's a pilot we're running this year. We continue to look for additional sites. So if this rings a bell with anyone on the call and you might think that there's an opportunity that we haven't identified yet, please let us know. Let's move to the next slide. All right, so one of the most important things we do besides rolling out our programs for you is education and awareness. And we've spent a great deal of time and effort to do reach out. This evening is a great example of community meetings to help educate and share and provide awareness. We've developed a lot of digital social media content. You may have seen our TV ads with our little squirrel. I believe his name is Walter. Not that it matters, but he has a name. And we've also done a lot of radio ads. So different methods or channels to get the word out and educate. I was on a call today with our community-based organizations. We had about 50 of them on a call, and we were educating them on all of the programs and offerings so they can get the word out to their constituents. So we're looking at every opportunity possible to do outreach. And most importantly, we're working with some key partners, including CBOs, regarding services to provide to our most vulnerable customers, our access and functional needs customers. So we're doing some extra things to ensure that those customers are receiving the right services during these events. We also have ongoing engagement with our governmental agencies and safety partners, our business resiliency team, constantly on calls. Our business customer division has regular calls with our essential service providers. Let's move on. All right, and this one's exciting, and it's directly related to Orange County. So we have had the pleasure and opportunity to be able to provide funding to support these heli tankers that we've been using, that have been used. So we partner with the Orange County Fire Authority, and we're expanding that into other areas now to help fund. I think we have 3 of them now that provide large water capacity fire protection or fire prevention, if you will. And this is an exciting program for us. You may have seen advertisement on TV, in fact, on this one, and we're looking forward to this continued partnership. This particular helicopter in the picture, I believe, was used to help fight 3 local fires in the area in 2020. So it's a great asset, and again, SCE is proud to be able to partner and provide that service to our communities. Next slide, please. All right, I'm going to wrap it up, and this is my call to action slide. So on the left, we've mentioned a lot of information. All of this is on our website. I want to encourage you, if you have the means to do so and the interest, to get familiar with all of this information on our website, sce.com/wildfire. We've developed a lot of content that I think is very valuable, and I hope you have the opportunity to review some of it. We are also going to provide an opportunity for you to provide feedback via survey this evening. We hope that you take the time to do so. We may think we're doing everything right, but there may be gaps, and quite frankly, if you can help us identify those gaps, that's the type of feedback we're looking for. So encourage you to please provide that open, honest feedback. I know you all will if you have the time to participate in that survey. Sign up for alerts. The home my account alerts are really valuable. We're going to do our best not to inundate you with over alerting you this year. I think you'll be happy with the improvements we make in that area, but that's the best way for you to stay in tune. A couple of programs I want to mention. Our medical baseline program is actually a program that can help reduce your cost of energy. It gives you an additional amount of electricity in the lower tier cost. So if you qualify for that program, please, I encourage you to sign up for it. We have our income qualified programs, CareFera, and then again, all the rebate programs that we've already covered. My last item, and that is, and I believe Kelly covered it in her opening slide, the most important thing we can do is be prepared. And so, we encourage everyone to have an emergency plan. Make sure you have the resources in a place where they can be accessed. Make sure you check on them on a regular basis so they haven't expired, for example. Make sure you have batteries for your flashlight. You have adequate water supply. And if you have family members, make sure you practice safe evacuation. How do you get out of the house if you have to in an emergency? And where do you go and where do you meet? Those are things that we highly encourage all customers to have a plan. And lastly, on our website, there are power outage tips and other resources available for you. So with that, I think this wraps up our formal presentation. I'm going to hand it back to Kelly, and I think we have time for Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Let's start with our first question. How are you working with telecommunication companies so that cell or internet service isn't lost when the power goes out? Christy, can you take that one?
Sure. Yeah, I think this question came in as part of the preparation leading up to this workshop or this meeting today. We've had numerous workshops with the telecommunication companies over the past year. We've outlined with them what our protocols are for PSPFs, what our maps are, what our criteria is, what our thresholds are. And so they now are informed as to what our plans are and are, I believe, making plans to do something similar. But if you have specific questions, I encourage you to reach out specifically to your telecommunication provider to get any specifics on what their plans are should we encounter a situation where we have high winds and a high fire potential.
Thank you, Christy. I don't see very many likes on our questions, so let's kind of jump around a little bit. Let's talk about solar incentives. David, could you please touch on our solar incentives?
Yeah, so we do have some very limited solar incentives today, mainly available for multifamily dwellings and disadvantaged communities. We've had in years past several solar rebates statewide, but the transition of that market is now considered to be in a mature state. And from a state funding point of view, there is a focus now to not necessarily provide state level funding other than those multifamily dwellings in disadvantaged communities. Now there are federal credits still available for solar, so I encourage you to look into that. SCE is a supporter of rooftop solar. It's actually one of the critical elements of our Clean Energy Pathway 2045. It's vital in order for us to achieve our carbon reduction goals. There's several elements of it, but solar, battery, electric vehicles are key to achieving our carbon reduction goals statewide. So we support solar.
Okay, David, there is an additional question related to solar. It says, are there any incentives for adding batteries to a solar system?
Yeah, absolutely. So we mentioned briefly the self-generation incentive program. That is a whole home battery. It can be paired with solar. Ideally, it is paired with solar, but it can run without solar as well. If you have solar on your rooftop or platform solar, wherever your solar comes from, and you can charge that battery during the day, that's an ideal scenario. So you can run off that battery in the evening or at night when the cost of energy is high. So it's a real advantage to helping to lower your overall cost of energy. Those programs are available. As I mentioned, there's a tiered level of incentives for SCHIP. Go to the website. It is a complex program, but at a minimum, I think we have a 20 cent per watt incentive towards batteries, and it goes all the way up to $1 a watt. So you can get a feel for the different levels.
Thank you, David. There's a question about the maps for the impacted areas on our website at sce.com/maps. If you click on Orange County, it will give you a comprehensive list by city of all the impacted circuits. I encourage you to look there. And as we mentioned previously, we will also post the deck that we went through today on our website at sce.com/wildfire. So that may take a couple of days, but I would encourage you to look there. Next question is about overhead wires on our utility poles. Are they owned by communication providers, and are they inspected by Edison or the CPUC? Christy, could you please take that question?
Yeah, no question, no problem. So great question. The majority of our poles are actually jointly owned. And so what that means is Edison owns a portion of the pole and a third party, typically a telecommunication company, owns a portion of the pole. Each company or utility is responsible for inspecting their own equipment on the pole. If by chance one utility sees something, with the other utility's equipment that may be of concern, we do try and notify each other's companies of, hey, there might be a concern here. But the ultimate responsibility is with the utility that owns the equipment. They are responsible for inspecting and maintaining their own equipment on the pole.
Thank you, Christy. There is another question about what specific expedited grid hardening steps is Edison taking to reduce wildfire risk adjacent to our extreme high fire risk cities? And I'm sorry, let me punt that one to Rob.
Yeah, thank you, Kelly, and thank you for the question. I think the question is referring to expedited grid hardening related to wildfire ignition risk. The answer in general is that Edison in the last couple of years and continuing forward has a very large program for installing covered conductor insulated wires on a large number of miles throughout our service territory. I think our plan is to have more than 4,000 miles installed by the end of 2022. And that those installations are prioritized based on wildfire risk. So those locations that are the riskiest locations are the locations that are going to get the prioritization for the most rapid installation of that insulated wire. The expedited grid hardening is on top of that. For those places that also have experienced a lot of PSPS impacts, we're further expediting covered conductor or insulated wire that will improve the ignition risk and also improve the PSPS experience.
Thank you, Rob. There is a question about time of use when the customer has solar panels, and we would encourage you to contact our customer service directly at 1-800-655-4555. There was also a question. I know that we responded with an email address, but I will send this to Christy, and it talks about concern over Edison's tree trimming practices. Christy, could you please touch on our vegetation management? Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. I appreciate the question. So over the past couple of years, the Public Utilities Commission has changed the requirements and trim distances for trees, specifically in high fire areas. The recommended distance now in high fire areas for tree clearance is 12 feet throughout the year. And so, I saw the question here expressing concern about our tree trimming practices. Some of that might be related to the fact that we are trying to adhere to the new recommended distance. Our tree contractors are certified line clearance trimmers, and so they go through training on how to trim trees around electrical equipment. Regardless, we'd be happy to work with you. We have arborists on staff. We'd be happy to reach out to you. I think we posted an email address that you can email. We can send one of our specialists out to meet with you, meet with your arborist to talk through what types of plans we have for trimming in that area. A lot of times this can also depend on the type of species. Some species are faster growing, and we need to make sure that we maintain the recommended distance throughout the year. So feel free to reach out to us. Happy to work with you to make sure that we're transparent and clear about what we're trying to do, and that we have a partnership with you on that.
Thank you, Christy. There's a question about how to enroll in the medical baseline program. I know our website, sce.com/medical baseline, but I don't know, David, if you have anything to add to that.
Yeah, just a little I can add. Please go to that website that Kelly just mentioned. I believe still through the end of the month, you can sign up for medical baseline without a medical doctor's written confirmation. So that's going to change here very soon if it makes a difference. But due to COVID, we loosened up the eligibility application requirements to eliminate that need for a doctor authorization. But again, it's going to change. So if it's easier for you to enroll now, I encourage you to do so.
Thank you, David. There is a question about Mylar balloons. They do pose a risk to our equipment when they are, in the air and they come into contact with our lines. I understand that there are some cities who have supported a ban, but that is on an individualized basis. And there may be some legislation that is still working its way through the process in the legislature. So I encourage you to stay tuned and engaged with your state legislators. Let's see. Is there a phone number or website to report tree and vegetation management issues? We have responded with safetrees@SCE.com. And again, our customer service phone number. I think this is one for you, Rob. What percentage of grid hardening and situational awareness stations and cameras have been completed? When will all the grid hardening be completed?
Yeah, thank you for the question. The first question is, Kelly, could you repeat that question again? I want to make sure that it had more than one part.
Yes. So it was fairly redundant, but what percentage of grid hardening and situational awareness stations and cameras have been completed?
Okay, yeah. So to that question of the percentage, it's at any given moment the percentage is increasing. So at any given moment, it depends on what time of day it is. And the percentage is hard to distill to a single percentage because every particular asset is different. So for example, if you look at the percentage of covered conductor, which is a linear asset, versus the percentage of weather stations or switches, that's a different unit to count percentages on. I think the answer is that we're continuing to install the grid hardening consistent with our grid hardening plans and our PSPS mitigation plans. As we complete the hardening efforts for the expedited grid hardening, we will be communicating the status in real time as we go, for the sake of letting our customers and the communities we serve know the status as we get closer to completion. But for the expedited grid hardening plans, our plans are to have the construction complete prior to the fall fire season, which means operational by October 1st.
Thank you, Rob, for that comprehensive assessment. David, it looks like solar is very popular this evening. I know that you mentioned that Edison is in favor of rooftop solar, but they would like to know more about our position. Is there anything that you can elaborate on?
There is a process to connect your solar. It's an interconnect process that we have to go through, and that enables the safe connection of the solar generation. As you know, when solar is generated, it can backfeed. It does backfeed into the grid. And that's how you do net energy metering, and you can get a credit for your overgeneration on solar. So solar actually helps us to manage our grid. It's all about balancing that solar generation and other sources of energy. People don't realize Edison procures a lot of our energy. So it's a combination of a lot of different assets that make up the electrons that flow through those wires and provide energy to your home. Solar is a key component to it. I'm not sure where the question is going with more specifics, but We absolutely do support solar. You know, I can remember several years ago when it wasn't the case, and we had to do some real soul searching to understand that solar is really a benefit for all of us, for the environment. There's just so many positive factors about solar, but we cannot rely on solar alone. And we still have the cost of the grid to cover. So, you know, as solar becomes part of that generation, and it's just added as another asset, we have to balance the cost out as well to manage that. The cost to manage the infrastructure doesn't go away. So we just have to figure out how to appropriately and equitably cover that cost. Stop there before I get myself in trouble.
Thank you, David. Yes, our number one concern is, you know, the affordability of rates. I think that's one of our core values. So touching on that and kind of expanding on those customer care programs, there is a question about the whole house battery system. There's a customer who would like that through our SCHIP program, but they do not currently qualify. So in terms of our existing guidelines, the question is, why can't Edison make that program available for any customer with solar?
It's a good question, and I think ultimately we would love to see more batteries in our environment, because they are a real benefit, and they can help stabilize the grid actually, if they're used in a fashion that supports us. We talked about you know, high energy consumption during the evening, and batteries are the perfect device to help manage that demand. But with respect to eligibility on the program, this is a statewide program. Edison doesn't get to make up the rules. We file program designs jointly with all of our other statewide IOUs. We present that to the commission. It gets approved or rejected and adjusted, and the rules are made. Just recently, this past year, we saw an encouraging enhancement to SCHIP that I think it directed close to $100 million into what's called equity resiliency. And that was to help customers in high fire risk areas to invest in that resiliency with the whole home battery. So it's an ongoing program. I don't think the funds are exhausted yet. If you're confident that for the individual asking about this, if you'd like to follow up, we can put you in touch with a program manager who can have a deeper discussion on program requirements and eligibility. So if you'll provide either an email or phone number, we'd be happy to get back with you and maybe follow up individually.
Thank you, David. There is another comment about requesting credits when customers are impacted by wildfires. This touches on, you know, a number of things that David has mentioned in terms of affordability and our general rate case. All of these costs are approved and go before our general rate case, which is on a 4-year cycle. So that happens in, you know, up north. David, did you have anything to touch on in terms of credits to customers?
You know, we look at this. I think what I can potentially add is that where a customer has been impacted and there is a potential case for SCE not handling the event in the appropriate way, then there's a claims reimbursement process for helping our customers if Edison did not act in the appropriate way. We use the word negligent. So, you know, an example of that might be if we de-energized the circuit, we had plenty of time to notify you and we failed to notify you, then we have failed to fulfill our obligation. And if you had a financial impact as a result of that, then you would have an appropriate case to file a claim through our claims process that would be reviewed for potential reimbursement. It's not necessarily a bill credit, but it is a reimbursement for the financial loss potentially. But I will emphasize that there has to be negligence on SCE's end in order typically for those claims to be approved. If we notify you and you have food spoilage, for example, and you've had ample time to go buy ice and put it in your fridge to keep your food cold, then your claim is more than likely not going to be approved in that scenario. We typically don't do a lot of bill credits unless it's tied to a program or a situation where perhaps we've overbilled, or there are some unique conditions for bill credits.
Thank you, David. Albert asked, what are two of Edison's biggest concerns for emergencies, which include earthquakes, floods, and fires? Christy, if you could take that one.
Sure, thanks, Albert. I'm not sure we could just limit it to those examples that you gave. We, as a utility that provides a critical service to Southern California, we worry about all emergencies, whether it's a natural disaster, a cyber attack, which we've seen over the past week in the news, or anything along those lines. So our main focus is to make sure that we as a company have business resiliency plans in place with our incident management teams that are on duty and rostered 24/7. Another key thing though is it does need to be a community response. And so for all of us, not just as customers, but as residents, we all should be prepared, as we touched on at the beginning of the meeting, with our emergency response kits, whether it is an earthquake or a power outage or a cyber attack. It's important that we as a community be prepared for any event that may come our way.
Thank you, Christy. I think this is our last question from Gary Wright, who asks, who should I contact if I notice a damaged pole in a high fire risk area like Crystal Cove State Park? First off, we want to thank you, Gary, for taking that initiative, and I want to pass this question to Christy.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you. Absolutely. If you see something concerning, please make sure that you notify us. I'm going to give you a phone number, and I'm hopeful that we can also post this. But if you see something like a wire down or damage to equipment, the number is 1-800-611-1911. And again, thank you so much for taking the initiative. Again, that number is 1-800-611-1911. Thank you.
Thank you, Christy. I think we've covered all of our questions tonight within our time frame. So kudos to everyone for your participation. I want to thank you for everything this evening, and especially our panelists. As mentioned earlier, you will be receiving a survey to provide us feedback. This meeting, as mentioned before, has been recorded. We will post a recording on our website in a few days, sce.com/wildfire, as well as other information and resources. We want to thank you all again, and we hope you have a wonderful evening. Thank you.